In the heart of ancient Egyptian cosmology lies a delicate dance between two eternal forces, Ma'at and Isfet, order and chaos. The civilization that flourished along the Nile for over 3,000 years built its worldview upon the sacred principle of Ma'at, not just truth and justice, but the structured harmony of the cosmos itself. Against this radiant ideal, the figure of Seth, god of storms, deserts, violence, and foreignness, stands as an apparent contradiction. Often vilified as the murderer of Osiris and the usurper of divine kingship, Seth is also paradoxically revered as the protector of the solar bark, the only god strong enough to repel the serpent of annihilation, Apophis. This video seeks to unravel the layered mythos of Seth, not as a simple villain of Egyptian theology, but as a complex and essential force in the Egyptian understanding of cosmic balance. Through mythological texts, temple inscriptions, political history, and comparative philosophy, we explore how Seth serves as a necessary embodiment of chaos, not to be defeated and forgotten, but to be integrated, revered, and contained. In a universe where stagnation is as dangerous as dissolution, Seth represents the tension that keeps the tapestry of Ma'at from fraying. His violence is not blind destruction, but disruption with purpose, an archetype of the unpredictable forces that challenge systems, test rulers, and birth transformation. To understand Seth is to understand the Egyptian soul, a soul that feared chaos, yes, but also knew that without it, the cosmos itself would grow brittle and lifeless. In this paradox lies the genius of Egyptian thought, a wisdom that remains urgent even for our modern world. Before pyramids rose from the sand, before hieroglyphs danced across temple walls, the Egyptians looked around their world and saw a fragile miracle. Here, in a land caught between the life-giving Nile and the consuming desert, they discerned a truth that would shape 3 millennia of religion, politics, and philosophy. Existence is neither accidental nor stable. It must be maintained. This truth was given a name, Ma'at. Ma'at was not just a goddess, though she was often depicted as a woman with an ostrich feather atop her head. Ma'at was the law of the universe, the hidden thread that held together the sky, the earth, the underworld, and the hearts of men. It was Ma'at that ensured the Nile would flood at the right time, that the pharaoh would rule justly, that the stars would return to their places each night. To live in accordance with Ma'at was to live rightly, but Ma'at was not guaranteed. She had to be enacted, upheld, defended. Rituals were not mere pageantry, they were acts of cosmic maintenance. Every temple was a fortress against dissolution. Every prayer, every festival, every carving in stone was a thread woven back into the fabric of reality. But what then of chaos? What of the desert wind that blew away crops, the foreign army that marched past the delta, the storm that cracked open the heavens with thunder? What of death? What of betrayal? Here enters the figure of Seth, the Red One, god of chaos. From our modern perspective, we might expect the Egyptians to cast Seth out of their pantheon, to name him devil and be done with it. But they did not. They gave him temples. They named kings after him. They placed him on the solar bark beside Ra himself. Why? Because the Egyptians understood a secret that even modern civilizations struggle to grasp. Chaos is not the enemy of order. It is its crucible. Without challenge, order becomes complacent. Without conflict, harmony becomes hollow. And so, they told stories, not to simplify, but to hold paradox. In these stories, Seth kills his brother Osiris in a terrible act of betrayal. But in other stories, he stands at the prow of the sun god's ship, battling the monstrous serpent Apophis, the embodiment of total annihilation. He is both villain and savior, traitor and protector. This is not inconsistency. This is truth. In this video, we journey into the storm-swept mythology of Seth. We will explore the dualism that defined Egyptian theology, Ma'at and Isfet, and how Seth embodies the necessary edge between them. We will examine the political uses of Seth's image, his mythological complexity, and the profound psychological insights his stories suggest. And in doing so, we will not only understand ancient Egypt more deeply, we will better understand the role of chaos in the human condition. To understand Seth's place in the Egyptian worldview, one must first grasp the central tension upon which all Egyptian cosmology rests: the eternal struggle between Ma'at and Isfet. Ma'at is more than a concept. It is existence itself in its proper form. It is the Nile rising and receding with the seasons. It is the stars keeping their courses. It is a just ruler on the throne, farmers planting in timely rhythm, priests speaking the right incantations in the right tone at the right hour. Ma'at is the sacred rightness of things. Isfet, on the other hand, is unraveling. It is drought. It is plague. It is drunken kings, unjust judges, ritual neglected, temples desecrated. Isfet is not a rival god. It is the absence of structure, the entropy that creeps in when vigilance fades. But here is the crucial nuance. Isfet is not wholly foreign to the cosmos. It is part of it. Like shadow to light, Isfet gives Ma'at definition. Without disorder, the Egyptians understood, there could be no need for order. The act of creation itself, in their cosmogonies, was the first imposition of Ma'at over the swirling waters of Nun, primordial chaos. In the Heliopolitan creation myth, the sun god Ra emerges from the chaos of Nun and speaks creation into being. But chaos is not destroyed, it is merely pushed back, held at bay. Each night, as Ra journeys through the underworld, he must again face Apophis, the serpent of unmaking. This continuous effort to maintain Ma'at is what gives Egyptian religion its dynamic character. It is not a faith of static perfection, but of eternal renewal. So where does Seth fit? Seth is not Apophis. He does not seek the end of all things, but he embodies the forces that test Ma'at from within: the foreigner, the storm, the dispute, the roar that interrupts the sacred silence. He is a god of Isfet, yes, but not of annihilation. He is internal chaos, not external oblivion. In this way, Seth serves a vital function. He is the agent of resistance. Without resistance, there can be no strength. Without opposition, Ma'at would be untested, unproven, and therefore meaningless. The Egyptians encoded this wisdom into story, symbol, and ritual. Whether in the myth of Osiris or the nightly journey of Ra, Seth is present as a catalyst. He is the one who causes the crisis, and sometimes the one who resolves it. This dual role makes Seth more than a villain. It makes him necessary. Seth's mythological presence looms large in the Egyptian imagination. His figure is ancient, older than the pyramids, older even than the Osirian myth that would later define him as a villain. In the earliest texts, such as the Pyramid texts, circa 2400 BCE, Seth appears not as a force of evil, but as a powerful deity associated with strength, protection, and might. He is mentioned in royal rituals and spells as one who helps the king ascend to the heavens. He is chaos, yes, but also power, raw, unbridled, and divinely sanctioned. But over time, two dominant mythological threads emerge, each casting Seth in starkly different lights. The most widely known story featuring Seth comes from the Osirian cycle. This myth, which reaches its literary maturity in the Middle Kingdom, c. 2055, 1650 BCE, tells of a sacred family: Osiris, Isis, Nephthys, Horus, and Seth himself, all siblings born of the sky goddess Nut and the earth god Geb. Osiris, beloved and righteous, rules Egypt with wisdom and benevolence. Seth, envious of his brother's power and popularity, plots his demise. In a tale filled with rich symbolism, Seth tricks Osiris into lying inside a coffin, a metaphor for death and containment, seals it, and throws it into the Nile. Eventually, Osiris is dismembered, his body cut into pieces and scattered across the land. Isis, mourning but resolute, searches for the parts of her husband's body. With the help of Nephthys and Anubis, she reassembles him long enough to conceive Horus, the falcon-headed child destined to avenge his father and reclaim the throne. What follows is a long and often contradictory battle between Horus and Seth, a struggle not only between nephew and uncle, but between order and chaos, succession and interruption, native kingship and foreign disruption. The contest includes legal trials before the gods, physical duels, shape-shifting battles, and even sexually charged encounters meant to humiliate and dominate. In the end, Horus is often said to triumph, regaining the throne and restoring cosmic balance. But even in victory, Seth is not annihilated. In many versions, He is given dominion over the desert, or appointed to guard Ra's bark. He is exiled, perhaps, but never erased. This myth is not merely a tale of politics or family betrayal, it is a cosmic drama. Seth's crime is not moral in the Western sense, it is cosmic. He disrupts divine succession, destabilizes Ma'at, but even in punishment he is not cast into oblivion. The Egyptians, always wary of extremes, preserve his place in the cosmos. If the Osirian myth paints Seth as a destabilizer, the solar myth presents a more complex image. Each night, the sun god Ra journeys through the underworld on his divine bark, accompanied by a host of gods. As the bark sails through the Duat, the shadowy realm of the dead, it is attacked by Apophis, Apep, the serpent of chaos. Apophis is not merely evil, he is absolute negation, a force that seeks to unmake the universe by devouring the sun and halting the cycle of time. And who stands at the front of the boat, spear in hand, ready to do battle? Seth. Here, Seth is not a threat to Ma'at, but its defender. He alone has the strength, the fury, and the unpredictability to match Apophis. The Egyptians understood that only chaos could fight chaos, that the orderly gods, for all their wisdom and light, were not equipped to face the serpent of night. Only Seth, the storm incarnate, could stand in the dark and roar back. This myth was reenacted daily in temples. Priests would recite spells to aid Seth in the fight, stabbing effigies of Apophis with knives and burning them in fire. These rituals were not symbolic, they were cosmic maintenance. Without Seth's nightly victory, the sun would not rise. Thus we see the duality, Seth the murderer and Seth the savior, Seth the usurper and Seth the guardian. The Egyptians embraced this contradiction, not as confusion, but as depth. Seth's chaos was not wild destruction, it was power that could be wielded. Beyond myth, Seth held real religious and political significance. In the Old Kingdom, he was revered alongside Horus. The earliest dual kingship titles often included both deities. Pharaohs were said to rule as a unification of Horus and Seth, two forces balanced within one body. Seth was not a marginal figure. He was central to the divine power of kingship. During the Hyksos period, c. 1650–1550 BCE, Seth's image grew even more complex. The Hyksos, Semitic rulers from the Levant, identified with Seth's foreignness and desert associations. They elevated him as protector, possibly connecting him to their own storm gods like Baal or Hadad. His cult center at Avaris flourished. Later, in the 19th dynasty, pharaohs such as Seti II, man of Seth, and Rameses II bore his name with pride. In a period marked by military expansion and political consolidation, Seth's aggressive nature was no liability. It was an asset. He was the god of war, strength, and bold leadership. But as Egypt faced increasing threats from outside, Libyans, Sea Peoples, and eventually Assyrians, Seth's associations with chaos and foreignness began to overshadow his protective role. By the late period, he was increasingly demonized. His cult centers declined, his myths were rewritten with darker tones, and yet he was never erased. Even in decline, Seth could not be fully banished. The Egyptians, always wary of extremes, knew that destroying chaos entirely would destroy the very tension that allowed Ma'at to endure. Seth is perhaps the most ambiguous god in Egyptian theology. Unlike Osiris, who embodies fertility and benevolent kingship, or Thoth, who represents wisdom and writing, Seth defies easy classification. His animal form is part of this mystery. The Set animal, also called the Shah, is unlike any known creature. Scholars have speculated that it may be a stylized aardvark, oryx, donkey, or an extinct animal. Others argue it was always mythical, a composite meant to represent Seth's otherness, his refusal to conform. This unclassifiability is no accident. Seth is the god of the margins, the wilds, the ungovernable. He is the desert to Osiris's fertile valley, the storm to Horus's calm sky. He is the necessary outsider, the one who does not fit, but whose presence tests the strength of the system. In literature and temple art, his duality is made explicit. In some scenes, he is bound and subdued. In others, he stands beside Horus, united in the symbol of the two lords. The Temple of Edfu, for example, contains depictions of Horus and Seth together binding the plants of Upper and Lower Egypt, a metaphor for unity through opposition. The Egyptians did not seek to resolve this tension. They honored it. The duality of Seth speaks to a deeper truth. That order is not the absence of conflict, but its management. True harmony comes not from the elimination of chaos, but from its recognition and containment. Seth is not evil. He is necessary disruption. In modern terms, we might compare Seth to the concept of creative destruction in economics, or to the psychological notion of the shadow, as discussed by Carl Jung. Seth is what happens when systems are challenged, when the ground shakes, and we must decide whether we will collapse or adapt. He is not to be loved, perhaps, but he is to be respected. To understand Seth fully, we must move beyond the realm of mythology and history and enter the inner world of human psychology and philosophy. The Egyptians, though not philosophers in the Greek sense, were deeply philosophical in practice. Their myths were not idle stories. They were spiritual technologies, symbolic systems that mirrored both cosmic structure and human nature. Seth, more than any other deity in the Egyptian pantheon, reveals this symbolic depth. He is not merely a character in a divine drama, but a mirror of the human psyche, particularly the parts we fear, reject, or misunderstand. Swiss psychologist Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, the unconscious aspect of the self that the ego does not recognize or accept. The shadow contains everything we deny: anger, jealousy, pride, aggression, but also creativity, power, and vitality. Jung warned that repressing the shadow does not destroy it. Rather, it causes it to emerge in unconscious and destructive ways. Seth is the Egyptian embodiment of the shadow. He is the outsider within the self. He disrupts the serenity of order, not because he is foreign, but because he is part of what must be integrated. In the Osirian myth, Seth's refusal to acknowledge Osiris's rule is not just betrayal. It is the eruption of the shadow, the part of the psyche that resists submission and questions legitimacy. But Seth is also the force that protects us from far worse chaos. In the solar myth, he is the one who stands against Apophis, the being of total annihilation. This is deeply symbolic. The shadow, when integrated, becomes a guardian. When rejected, it becomes the destroyer. In modern life, we see this dynamic play out constantly. Repressed emotions erupt as violence. Unacknowledged fears become prejudice. Unintegrated ambition turns toxic. The Egyptians, in their wisdom, did not erase Seth. They gave him a role. The Egyptian understanding of chaos was sophisticated. While they feared Isfet, they also recognized that absolute stability is not health. It is stagnation. Systems, both cosmic and human, require friction to grow. Order without challenge becomes brittle. Harmony without discord becomes hollow. Seth's chaos is not a nihilistic force. It is creative destruction, the necessary shaking of the foundations that allows for rebuilding. He reminds us that the storm, though terrifying, also brings rain. The desert, though barren, sharpens survival. The outsider, though feared, often carries the seeds of renewal. In this sense, Seth can be seen as the god of transformation. He breaks the old so the new can emerge. He tests the pharaoh to ensure his strength. He challenges Horus, forcing the young god to grow into a worthy ruler. Even in the myth where he loses, Seth's role is crucial. Without his challenge, Horus would not rise. This echoes the dialectic found in many spiritual traditions. Light and dark are co-creative. In Taoism, yin and yang are not enemies but partners. In Hinduism, Shiva, the destroyer, is also the source of purification and rebirth. Seth belongs in this pantheon of paradoxical deities, not evil but essential. Seth also challenges our ethical frameworks. In Western moralism, figures are often placed on absolute axes of good and evil, but the Egyptian worldview was more nuanced, more cyclical, and less concerned with moral purity than with cosmic balance. Seth is not good, but he is not evil. He is necessary. This offers a powerful ethical lesson. We must learn to work with the disruptive forces in life, rather than simply remove them. In leadership, this might mean embracing dissent. In personal growth, it may mean confronting what we fear, In justice, it may mean recognizing the humanity in those who resist the systems we uphold. To follow Ma'at is not to avoid chaos, it is to navigate it, and no figure teaches us this better than Seth. Night falls over the Nile, the sun dips below the western horizon, and the world enters the realm of shadows. But the Egyptians do not sleep in fear. They know that even now, the solar bark is sailing, its golden sails unfurled across the black waters of the Duat. At the prow stands Seth. His spear is raised. His eyes scan the void. Somewhere ahead, the massive coils of Apophis stir, writhing with hunger and hatred. The other gods tremble, but not Seth. He is the storm that walks. He was made for this. And so, the battle begins again. Each night, Seth fights not because he is pure, but because he is strong. Not because he is peaceful, but because he is necessary. In his chaos lies the power to protect. In his fury, the resistance to complete destruction. This myth was no idle tale. To the Egyptians, it was cosmic reality. Every sunrise was not a given. It was a victory, won through struggle. And Seth played the crucial role. He was the one who dared to face the darkness, the one who stood in the place no other god could. What then does this mean for us? In a world increasingly obsessed with control, order, and certainty, the Egyptians offer an alternative wisdom, that true harmony includes its opposite, that balance is forged, not found, that chaos, when respected and integrated, becomes a source of strength. In our personal lives, Seth teaches us to confront our inner storms, not to suppress them, but to learn from them. In our societies, he reminds us that opposition, protest, and disruption are not always threats. They may be signs of misalignment, calls for renewal. Seth is not the god we worship. He is the god we must reckon with. He is the scream against injustice, the question that shatters complacency, the wild wind that tests the walls of the temple. Without him, we might build perfect systems, only to discover they are too fragile to endure. The Egyptians understood this. That is why they did not destroy Seth. They gave him a place, not at the center perhaps, but at the edge, at the threshold, at the prow of the eternal boat. And because of that, the sun still rises,